I'm Jake, a software engineer in my mid-30s and a devoted husband. Known as dependable rather than flashy, I'm like a sturdy foundation that goes unnoticed until there's trouble, just like a house falling apart. On a cool and crisp Thursday evening in Seattle, the city seemed to settle into its usual peacefulness after sunset. Our company had organized a formal rooftop dinner at the Azure Tower downtown, meant to boost morale, but ultimately serving as an occasion for executives to enjoy a taste of celebrity status. The invitation called for cocktail attire, so I donned the navy jacket, slacks, and the one pair of brown leather shoes that had withstood the test of time in my closet for over 5 years. Earlier, Bella had sent a text saying she'd be late due to work. Team Sync is dragging, she explained, saving a glass of that wine I like. That emoji she used felt like a comforting touch on my shoulder, a small gesture that speaks volumes after nearly a decade of marriage, conveying, hey, I see you. So I patiently waited. The rooftop terrace was absolutely stunning. I entered the scene with string lights hanging like stars between the planters, a live pianist playing slow renditions of unexpected pop songs turned jazz classics. The air was filled with the enticing aroma of grilled lamb lollipops and roasted garlic. People gathered in small clusters, drinks in hand, with slightly crooked name tags pinned on their chests. Although not one for such events, I tried to blend in, offering smiles and nods, engaging in awkward small talk with DevOps individuals whom I barely knew beyond Slack interactions. Despite my efforts to socialize, my eyes kept wandering toward the elevator, each opening causing a flutter in my chest. As I scanned the room, Bella was nowhere to be seen. Taking slow sips of my wine, pacing myself, I'd assumed she was caught up in another last-minute Slack flurry, a world where urgent matters were often masked by bold subject lines. Positioned near the bar, my gaze suddenly found her, not making her way towards me from the elevator as anticipated, but already seated at a table in the distant corner beneath a heater. The lamp was nearly hidden behind a planter containing tall ornamental grasses, causing a moment of confusion for me. There was no text from her indicating her arrival, and she appeared without a wave or an attempt to locate me, accompanied by Evan, the new marketing manager who had relocated from the late office 6 months ago. I recalled Bella's initial mention of him, describing him as possessing a Hollywood energy, and that he was the type of person who knew he was attractive but pretended to be modest about it. He had a way of delivering every sentence as if it were a joke that others might not fully grasp. It somehow elicited laughter. While I hadn't faced any direct issues with him, there was something about his demeanor that unsettled me. He exuded a slickness and an evident awareness of his influence on people, particularly women, including Bella. In that moment, I considered redirecting my attention, distancing myself on the terrace and feigning ignorance of their presence. However, the way she leaned in toward him at the table, her lips forming a smile at something he said, captivated my curiosity. Her appearance in that red dress, the red dress that froze me in place, brought back a flood of memories. It had been a birthday gift from me during our second year of marriage, a low-back halter neck that fit her like a second skin. She used to jokingly refer to it as her danger dress. There had been a time when she wore it on our anniversary, back when our relationship still had a spark. Now seeing her in it with him felt like witnessing someone else living in a cherished memory of mine. I found myself moving closer, driven by a need to eavesdrop, to grasp at any hint of innocence in their conversation. Maybe it was just work-related banter, I tried to convince myself. Yet, as I caught a snippet of their exchange, my illusions shattered. While Evan compared me to stability, like antivirus software that goes unnoticed, Bella's laughter revealed a level of intimacy that cut through me like a knife. It was a shared moment of unguarded laughter, a connection that went beyond mere flirtation or casual catch-up between colleagues. It dawned on me that there was something deeper between them, something that hit me with a painful realization of the true nature of their relationship. They've already crossed the line in their heads, maybe not physically but emotionally. She was halfway across the country from me. I didn't say a word. I walked up to their table, still holding the glass of wine I'd gotten for her. Neither of them saw me approach. I placed it on the edge of the table gently, like I was leaving an offering. Bella's head snapped up, and for half a second I saw her expression falter, like someone had just pulled a curtain open mid-performance. Then I turned and walked away. Not fast, not dramatic, just walked. My heart wasn't racing, my fists weren't clenched. There was no internal scream, no cinematic swell of heartbreak. Just this cold, heavy silence in my chest, like someone had turned the volume of my life all the way down. My feet carried me down the stairs and out onto the street before my brain caught up. I don't remember where I went after that. I just remembered the city felt louder than usual. Cars, conversations, that stupid piano music trailing behind me. A ghost haunted me. I glanced at my phone and found no messages, no missed calls. Only that cruel emoji from earlier still mocking me. In that moment, the meaning evaded me, but one thing was clear. A shift had occurred with no turning back. Following the rooftop night, there were no explosive outbursts or tearful confessions. Bella arrived home as promised, acting as though nothing had changed. "Hey babe," she casually greeted while discarding her heels by the door. Seated on the couch with a forgotten drink in my hand, I peered at her closely. For a brief moment, I almost believed I had imagined it all. Yet the wine stain on her dress and the memory of placing down my glass shattered that illusion. "Just tired?" I muttered as she leaned in for a kiss, causing me to recoil slightly. Yes, but she seemed oblivious to it. Perhaps she did notice and simply chose to remain silent. From that night on, it became her modus operandi to act normal, or at least to pretend to be, while I couldn't shake off my suspicions. It's interesting how once you start doubting someone, everything begins to appear as evidence. Her voice would soften slightly when she professed her love. Her phone always lay face down on the countertop, notifications silenced, ostensibly to avoid distractions, she joked, claiming it helped her stay present. Yeah, right. She began taking more evening showers, a departure from her usual morning routine. I casually inquired once if she had resumed late-night yoga sessions. "Oh no, just hot days," she replied, kissing me as if to reassure me. There was a new fragrance as well, floral powdery scent that lingered in the air long after she had left the room. I first noticed it on a Sunday morning when she descended the stairs in a shirt and jeans, exuding the fragrance as if she had just strolled through a department store fragrance section. "What's that?" I asked, gesturing toward the invisible cloud surrounding her. She nonchalantly replied, "Just some niche boutique scent." A sample from work without lifting her eyes from her phone. During dinner, I attempted to revive the closeness we once shared. The waiter at our beloved Thai restaurant still referred to me as Mr. Medium Spice. While she forced a polite laugh, her focus remained on her phone. Its buzz went unnoticed initially as she instinctively turned it face down. Gradually, the joy between us seemed to fade away like a time sequence. The shared inside jokes that once elicited hearty laughs were now met with strained smiles. Our embraces became lighter and briefer. She no longer nestled against me on the couch, instead choosing to sit on the opposite end, knees up, endlessly scrolling. One evening, when I returned with a glass of water, she hastily switched tabs on her laptop. No words were spoken, but both of us sensed the growing distance. I started to pick up on how she talked about Evan Moore and his remarkable achievements. During meetings, he often stimulates ideas and maintains the brand tone effortlessly. Lately, I found myself unconsciously keeping count of how frequently his name arises each day. Sometimes it's mentioned twice, other times maybe five, but never zero. When I casually remarked that the two of them make a great team, she mentioned how he quickly grasps things. That used to be something I understood, but now every small detail seemed like a weapon. She seemed to be changing, wearing lipstick again, skipping meals for work, taking longer showers, and working on weekends for a few hours. As she hurriedly prepared for the campaign launch on a Saturday morning, I could feel the erosion within me. It was disheartening not being able to pinpoint our status as we once did, leaving me feeling lost and uncertain. It's a delicate balance, always hanging by a thread, but the reality is, you can't mend what someone else has already chosen to break. As the night settled in, I found myself staying awake after she had drifted off to sleep. Alone in the dimly lit living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of the fridge, I pondered the origins of our unraveling. Perhaps there was no definitive moment. Maybe love doesn't fade dramatically, but rather dissipates quietly through withheld "I love yous," half-hearted embraces, and avoided eye contact. It was akin to feeling abandoned by someone who still shared your bed. Then there was the recurring dream, the logical "I know," where I stood in our living space, attempting to communicate something to her. Yet my voice was inexplicably silenced. She would gaze right through me, almost as if I were invisible. Eventually, she would turn away and exit through the door. Upon waking, I would find her absent, at work, at the gym, at brunch, perpetually elsewhere. That sense of absence was the most unsettling aspect of it all. I stopped envisioning a future with us and began seeing her as a past love. Our connection felt more like a fading memory that I was desperately trying to hold together with makeshift fixes and good intentions. I no longer reached out for her in bed, stopped inquiring about her whereabouts, and ceased making plans for our weekends. It was as if a part of me had silently surrendered, slipping away like a calm descent into water without a ripple. People often talk about knowing when a relationship is over, and it's true. Sometimes that realization arrives quietly, like a soft whisper. It might be during a dinner where she seems more engrossed by her phone than by you, or when her touch feels colder and more distant than before. These subtle cues signal to me that our struggles weren't just a passing phase, but rather a prelude to the inevitable end. On a cold and dreary Saturday that seemed to mirror Seattle's somber mood, Bella mentioned heading to the gym for a spin class as she tossed her duffel into the back seat. Taking the seat with practiced ease, she assured me she'd be back by 11. I acknowledged her words with a nod and flashed that half smile I had been holding lately before returning to feigning interest in my phone. Despite her casual departure, something about her demeanor seemed scripted. There was an unmistakable artificiality in her energy. Her upbeat tone felt forced, her gym shoes were unusually pristine, and she didn't have her usual water bottle in hand. A sense of unease crept over me. Was it paranoia or intuition? I hesitated for a few moments before deciding to act, hastily grabbing my coat and leaving without a clear destination in mind. As I drove aimlessly, starting with a simple loop around the block before venturing through the heart of the city and up into Capitol Hill, I tried to convince myself that I was just in need of fresh air. Yet my subconscious began steering me toward the Brixton district, a bohemian area we used to frequent on lazy weekends before our lives became consumed by routines and silent meals. I recalled a cozy wine bar called the Violet Fig on the corner, a place she had always adored. As I neared the familiar establishment, I found myself contemplating. I felt foolish and uncertain as I considered turning back. That familiar silver sedan, with its cracked registration sticker, was parked right in front. My stomach sank as if I had driven off a cliff. I pulled over a few spots behind it, gripping the wheel tightly. I couldn't help but stare at her car, fearing it would vanish and leave me looking like a fool. But it remained a mocking presence. After a moment of hesitation, I stepped out. The air carried the scent of wet pavement and rosemary from a nearby planter. Walking slowly, my footsteps were muffled by the sidewalk. Peering through the boutique bar's large front window, I saw soft lighting, velvet curtains, and rows of wine bottles displayed like trophies. And there she was, Bella in the same black sweater, laughing at something I couldn't hear. Evan sat across from her, his hand casually resting on her waist, seemingly fitting in like he belonged there, as if it wasn't their first meeting. At that moment, Bella sat close by with one leg crossed over the other, her face slightly tilted as she swept her hair behind her ear. A gesture she once reserved for me when we were deeply in love. Her smile was gentle and familiar, the kind that conveys a desire to connect. Unseen by them, I remained motionless outside in the chilly air, observing the scene as if watching an unchosen movie. There was no drama, no kiss, nothing provocative, just a sense of quiet intimacy between two people who seemed comfortably close. Perhaps what hurt the most was how ordinary it all appeared. How relaxed she seemed with him while my world seemed to be falling apart on the other side of the window. The silence in my mind was overwhelming. I couldn't say how long I lingered there, but it was long enough to realize I had seen quite enough, long enough to commit to memory the way she reached for her glass without a glance, and the way Evan leaned in to whisper something that elicited a smile from her, a smile she hadn't shared with me in months. Turning away, I walked. I returned to my car calmly, gently closed the door, refrained from shedding tears, and resisted the urge to reach out to her through text. There was no need. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside of me. The doubts, the uncertainties, and the justifications vanished. I was no longer questioning or assuming. I simply knew. And surprisingly, this knowledge brought relief rather than pain. Driving home in silence, I opted not to play any music or make any phone calls. I gripped the wheel, allowing numbness to envelop me. When Bella arrived back home at noon, she planted a kiss on my cheek and commented on how grueling her spin class was. She joked about never letting Claire choose the studio again. I silently nodded in agreement. Hungry? I asked, catching her off guard. Sure, yes, she replied. I prepared eggs for us both, noting how she always enjoyed hers with hot sauce. As I observed her from across the table, I wondered if she sensed the change within me, if she could tell that the man sitting before her was not the same as the one she had left in the morning. Perhaps she didn't notice. Maybe she did, but was hesitant to address it. Following breakfast, we didn't exchange many words. She retreated upstairs to shower, while I remained in the kitchen, tending to the dishes. I washed the dishes slowly and deliberately, treating each plate as though it was part of a ritual I needed to complete before moving forward. Later, she invited me to watch a movie. but I declined, citing work that I needed to finish. She nodded understandingly and settled on the couch with a blanket, her phone lighting up intermittently. I didn't ask about the messages. That night, I struggled to sleep, lying awake and staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me. I turned to look at her and realized something that sent a chill down my spine. She was already emotionally distant. Although she was physically present, it seemed like the love between us had long faded. A week after the incident with the violet fig, Bella suddenly proposed a getaway to Hillsdale. There was no warning or hint of remorse, just a casual suggestion to spend a weekend at the old cabin by the lake. Her mention of Hillsdale seemed like a callback to happier times, with her envisioning a trip free of distractions and work, just the two of us like in the past. Time had passed. I regretted not refusing, yet curiosity got the better of me. A part of me longed to witness her attempt at salvaging what remained, if anything at all. Perhaps, deep down, I desired to witness the demise in a serene setting where the unspoken cries could be heard. As we departed on a Friday afternoon, the journey seemed longer than I recollected, taking 3 extra hours. Bella, more animated than she had been in weeks, took on the role of our road trip DJ and shared anecdotes about a ridiculous Slack conversation from work. I chuckled at the appropriate times and interjected with "that's crazy" when fitting, all the while observing her surreptitiously, pondering as she sensed the growing chasm between us. She had adorned herself with a new perfume she had never worn around me before. Arriving at the cabin at dusk that fall, we were greeted by its familiar features: the creaking porch and the chipped blue paint on the window trim. The scent of aged wood mingled with the aroma of pine needles and a hint of mustiness. She entered first, turning around slowly. "Still here?" she mused softly. I simply nodded in response. There wasn't barely a second where she looked like she might say something real. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Instead, she turned on the tiny TV mounted over the stone fireplace and flipped through static until she found a station playing some romantic comedy we'd already seen a dozen times. I dropped our bags in the bedroom, came back out, and she was already curled up on the couch with her legs tucked under her, phone in hands, smiling faintly at something on the screen. I sat beside her. She didn't look up. We didn't talk. I tried. I offered to start a fire, asked if she wanted to take a walk by the lake, suggested a game of cards, anything to create a crack in the shell. She smiled and said, maybe later, then went back to scrolling. I nodded like that didn't sting. After a while, I got up and headed to the bathroom. The shower hissed and steamed, filling the small room like fog on glass. I stood under the water longer than necessary, hoping it would wash away that hollow feeling building in my chest. I wished for something fiery enough to melt the numbness within me away. Remember that night when I lay beside her in bed. We gazed at the ceiling as if we were strangers sharing a motel room. She turned away, not in anger, not in sadness, but in silence. There were no sweet good nights, no tender touches, not even the gentle brush of her foot against mine like she used to do when she couldn't sleep. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet ticking of the old wall clock and the sight of the wooden beams above, I had an epiphany. I wasn't feeling anger, confusion, or anything at all. The space in my chest where hope used to reside was now vacant. Silently, I turned to face her back, observing the rhythm of her breath and silently bid farewell. This weekend did not mark a new beginning or a fresh start. It was a somber goodbye at eulogy. Nested within the protective embrace of pine trees and shrouded by the tranquility of the brisk lake, we shared moments of broken laughter as the TV drones on in the background, its presence barely acknowledged. The following day, she brewed coffee in a worn chipped mug, handing it to me with a facade of normalcy. I accepted it with a smile, but tasted nothing beyond the bitterness of deceit lingering in the air. Returning from Hillsdale on a late Sunday afternoon, Bella chattered incessantly during the journey, her words often devoid of substance. The eerie silence of the lake, a fox sighting by the trailhead, plans for a revisit in the spring. I offered intermittent nods and vague acknowledgments, the hum of the engine filling the silent void between us. It felt as though we were recounting our getaway for an unseen observer, narrating a tale that lacked genuine connection. As our car eased into the familiar driveway, she tenderly squeezed my hand, whispering softly, "I'm glad we went." I glanced down at our entwined fingers, feeling a sense of familiarity mingled with a stark sense of detachment, akin to grasping a fleeting memory rather than a living, breathing presence. "Me too," I replied, weaving yet another untruth into the delicate fabric of our strained relationship. Little did I know, it would be the final falsehood I'd ever tell her. The next morning, I rose at dawn, filled with a sense of resolve and impending change. Earlier than her usual wake-up time, she lay sound asleep in the guest room. Unofficially, it had become my new crash spot, though my clothes still resided in our bedroom closet. Walking past her, I saw her curled up on her side, breathing softly under the comforter we had selected together from an expensive boutique in Queen Anne. Standing there, I observed her for a moment before quietly walking away. There were no dramatics, no outbursts of anger or tears. Instead, I mechanically, coldly, and methodically made a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and initiated the divorce process. It felt like just going through a checklist. Log in, fill out the form, attach the documents, and hit submit. By noon, I had the paperwork printed, placed in a manila folder, and left it on the kitchen table amidst the salt shaker and her untouched favorite candle. Without a word or note, I knew she would understand once she returned home. I found myself in the garage, clearing out the backseat of my car when she cheerfully greeted me, asking about dinner plans as if it were any other day. Did you cook? Should we order Thai? Takeout was forgotten as I remained silent. Upon entering the kitchen, she called out for Jake. Leaning against the doorframe, I observed as she opened the folder, her hands trembling around the papers. After a moment of stillness, she whispered, "Are you serious?" I chose not to respond. Jake, this isn't funny, she continued, her eyes wide and pleading. No, ma'am, you can't just do this. You can't just decide without talking to me. I finally spoke up, saying, I did talk. You just weren't listening. Her reaction was immediate as she implored me to explain. Please, just tell me what's going on. I know things have been off, but we can fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit work if that's what it takes. I'll block Evan. I'll do whatever. My words cut through her like a knife. I don't want to fix it. Taken aback, she struggled to respond, her desperation turning to anger. Oh, I see, she retorted sharply. Now you're not willing to give me an opportunity, are you? Deciding to discard everything just like that. I simply observed her. Then suddenly she erupted, seizing the coffee mug from the kitchen counter. My mug emblazoned with "World's Okay Husband." She hurled it against the wall, causing it to shatter into ceramic fragments. You're not a man, she hollered. You're merely a piece of furnishing with a paycheck, insignificant, dispensable. You're not even deserving of desire. I remained unfazed, standing still as she unleashed her turmoil upon me. After she finished, breath heavy, eyes ablaze, I pivoted and ascended the stairs. Without slamming the door or packing a bag, I settled on the edge of the guest bed and gazed at the empty wall. She didn't come after me. Some days later, she slipped a letter under the door, typed on formal paper. Apologies, reminiscences, pledges. A desire to start anew. I still hold affection for you. Didn't overcome this. She even specified a date and time for a discussion, as if there were a calendar appointment squeezed amid appointments. I never unfolded the letter. There was no need. My decision wasn't etched in ink. I was sealed in indifference at yet another work dinner. Only this time not on a rooftop, but in a private room at a downtown steakhouse. Despite not intending to go, my manager had insisted. Bella, marketing's golden girl, was also present, already a few glasses deep. As someone proposed a toast about balance in marrying well, she casually quipped, the trick is to marry someone who pays the bills. In bed, he's like disconnected Wi-Fi, but hey, at least the mortgage is covered. With a tilt of her head, a careless flick of her wine glass that silenced the room. The table erupted in laughter, but I remained quiet, feeling the air grow thick around me as I rose slowly from my seat. I acknowledged my boss, thanked him for the wine, and left without making eye contact, avoiding any scene. The following days at home felt like wandering through a museum of our past life. Bella attempted to reconnect with me, touching my arm, offering tea, sitting closer on the couch in an effort to bring me back. Moving toward a version of us that no longer existed. I had already departed. Not physically, but emotionally, taking with me everything that held significance that night when I finally broke the news to her that I was leaving for good. Seeing her collapse to the ground, pleading as if she had just realized the seriousness of my departure, was heartbreaking. She tried to grasp at any excuse, claiming it was a joke or the result of intoxication. But the moment I truly left was when she turned me into a joke. It was when she gazed into my eyes but only saw indifference. It was when my love for her faded and memories of her began to blur. Goodbyes can be strange. Sometimes they are left unspoken as we simply walk away, never looking back.